So we can say that this is true for both the rhombus and for the square, because that property was true for the rhombus and then it trickles down to the square. If you're ever confused, just draw a picture and take a look at it, okay? It will help greatly. It is equiangular. We just did this one on the homework question. Somebody asked about that one. Which two were my equiangular ones? Rectangles and squares. Alright? It is regular. What does regular mean? Put in your own words. Regular. Yeah, it's pretty. Can you be more specific? Equal. Same size, same shape that you're thinking about congruent. All angles are all sides congruent. Can you give me an example? What's a regular octagon? Stop sign. Where's a regular pentagon? The pentagon. Alright? So regular means all sides are equal, all the angles are equal. Which one is that true for? Is that true for parallelogram? 1 second, Ted. So it's true for parallelogram. All sides are equal? No. Is it true for a rectangle? No. So all the angles are equal for a rectangle, but are all the sides? No. What about for a rhombus? Yes. So all the sides are equal for a rhombus, but are all the angles? No. What about for a square? Yes. So a square is regular, because it has all four equal sides and it has all four right angles. Ted, you had a question?
About the pentagon. Is that right? They measured it?
You want to see a picture of it? So you don't believe me? Whoops. Pentagon overhead. There's a picture of the Pentagon from overhead. See how it's a regular pentagon? All five sides are equal, and then actually inside the Pentagon they have a courtyard. So inside you have another regular pentagon. It's just a courtyard. It's just trees and stuff. It's pretty big inside. When they built it, it was designed, there's a lot of military offices and stuff in there. So it was designed so that all the offices could be fairly close together. So apparently, I'm not sure if this is true, but the rumor is the closer you get to the courtyard, the more important you are. And then the rumor is that from any office building on any floor to the other side will take 7 minutes tops at walking speed. That's what I've heard. I'm not sure. I've never tested it, but that's what I've heard. I don't know. I haven't heard that, but it could be true. I'm not sure when they built it. So we were on opposite sides are congruent. Find it on your property sheet. Opposite sides are congruent. Find it on your property sheet. Where is it? Parallelogram. So if it's true for a parallelogram, will it be true for a rectangle? Yeah. Will it be true for a rhombus? Yeah. Will it be true for a square? Yeah. Yes. So remember, parallelogram shares it with everything. This will be what's going on here? This will be true for a parallelogram. It will be true for a rectangle, a rhombus, and a square. Opposite sides are parallel. Find that on your sheet. Where is it? Parallelogram. So if it's a parallelogram, what does that mean? Is it true for the other ones? So it works for a parallelogram, rectangle, rhombus, and square. Diagonals bisect each other. Find it on your property sheet. Diagonals bisect each other. That's parallelograms? So if it's parallelograms, does it work for all the other ones?
Yeah.
Parallelogram, rectangle, rhombus, square. Diagonals are perpendicular. Diagonals are perpendicular. Find it on the property sheet. A rhombus is not true for a rectangle. Just here for the sake of study. So if it's true for rhombus, it's also true for a square. And the last one, the diagonals bisect opposite angles. Rhombus, and therefore what else?
And a square.
And a square. Mario, easy. Alright? You're a little loud. Alright? Notice that all these properties are true for the square. The square gets the benefit of getting all the properties that trickle down from above, right? The square's the big dog, right? Gets all the properties, right? Any questions with these? Okay? Now, for these, it's a little tricky, okay? For any rhombus, love. Decide whether the statement is always true or sometimes true. Draw a diagram. So these will definitely show up on the quiz or the test, okay? It says for any rhombus love, decide whether the statement is always or sometimes true. Draw a diagram. So our first step is we need to draw a diagram. So we need to draw a rhombus. Make it very neat on your page. There's the rhombus. Okay. When it says rhombus love, when it says rhombus love, we just have to be sure that we label it in order. So it either has to go clockwise or counterclockwise, it doesn't matter, as long as it spells out love. It doesn't matter where you start either. So I'm going to start in the bottom left. L-O-V-E. Notice how it walks around the shape? You don't skip or jump. If you skip or jump, you'll get a different looking picture from what you're supposed to. So please, make sure that you write them in order. Now, let's start and try and add some properties to this. So you guys, tell me what I need to mark up. So what properties do I know about this rhombus? Give me some properties that I can mark and add to the diagram. What properties could I add? Okay? Opposite are. Opposite angles are congruent. Red and red. So those two are opposite, and then also O and D. Thank you. Okay? Another property we can add. Should be looking at your property sheet that I gave you. Diagonals bisect each other. So there's your diagonals. We know that they bisect each other. I'm not going to add it because we get it really confusing. That's absolutely true, but okay. What else do we know? Think simple. If we're talking about the rhombus, are the parallelogram properties true? So what? Opposite sides are parallel. So this one is parallel to this one, and OL is parallel to VE. Let me get the light so you can see the color it looks like. Is that better? No sleeping. What else can we do? What is it? Both sides are parallel. We just added those. That's what this symbol means. The arrows being parallel. There's a lot more we can add. Consecutive angles are supplementary. I agree with that. It's going to be hard to mark. We don't really have a symbol for supplementary, but let's remember that in the back of our head. It's true. Diagonals are perpendicular. Okay, I'm okay with that. What else? The There's one big one that we're missing. What's the definition of a rhombus? Four congruent sides. So this side, you can go to this side, and that side. So they're all congruent. I think that's enough for right now. Let's start, okay? Let's see what we can do. Before we begin, we drew a rhombus that was slanted, right? If you look at our pictures from our Venn diagram, rhombus also included what? A square. Because a square is a type of rhombus, right? A very special one. So let's draw a little picture of a square, because remember, a rhombus could also be a square, and that's why these are tricky. And a square has all four right angles, and all four sides are congruent, okay? So please, on your test, if you're confused and it says rhombus or it says square or rectangle, draw a picture, okay? Draw it from scratch, and then just take a look at it. All right, is angle O congruent to angle V? So our question is not yes or no. It is always or sometimes true. So take a look. In our regular rhombus, the basic one, is O congruent to V? O, V? So just in our regular one, just in the top one, is O congruent to V? Why sometimes? But I didn't ask if they're supplementary. I agree that they are, but I didn't ask if they're supplementary. I said, are they congruent? Is O acute or obtuse? Is V acute or obtuse? Can an acute angle ever equal an obtuse? No. The other notice that's a different number of arcs. This one has 1. This one has 2. So are they equal for this one? No. Okay. What about a square? Do you agree that a square is a type of rhombus?
Yes.
So look at this. Are these two equal?
Yes.
So are you going to answer that as always true or sometimes true? Always? So we just said this one didn't work, right? So it has to be sometimes. When is that sometimes? Well, it's when we're talking about a square. So remember, a square is a special type of rhombus. Is this real confusing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So yeah, so remember, a rhombus is a very special type of, let me start over. A square is a very special type of rhombus. Okay. L is congruent to V. First look at your basic rhombus. Is L congruent to V?
Yeah.
Yes? Can we agree with that? Are we okay with that, everybody?
Yeah.
Look at your square. Is L congruent to V? Yes? So that can be always true or sometimes true? Always. Because it worked for both cases. Does that make sense?
Will we have to do this one for the test?
Yes. In fact, I definitely said that.
What?
I said specifically, this will show up on the quiz and test. LO is congruent to OV. Find LO. Look at your rhombus only first. Is LO congruent to OV? Why not? Because they're not across from each other? So how do we mark congruent sides? With the tick mark. How many tick marks does LO have? 1. How many does OV have? 1. So are those congruent? Remember, the definition of a rhombus has 4 equal sides, right? So a rhombus has 4 equal sides. So LO is congruent to OV. Yes, I agree for this one. Is it true for the square? That LO is equal to OV? Yes. Sometimes or always? Always. Because it works for both. Notice that these would be almost impossible to do if we didn't draw the diagram, right? If you did these just by in your head, it would be really, really hard. LE is congruent to VO. So LE is on the bottom, is congruent to VO. Is that true for the rhombus? Is that true for the square? So sometimes or always?
Always.
Always. Is this getting a little easier? I hope. Is it getting a little easier at all or no? A little bit. Alright, this one's going to be a little tricky. LV is congruent to OE. LV is congruent to OE. First off, tell me someone, what do we call those? What is LV and OE? What are those called? Diagonals, okay? So look at your rhombus. Do those look congruent? So let's measure them. I'm going to use these markers. So let's see. LV is 1 marker, 2 marker, about 3 markers long. You see that? If we look at OE though, is that 3 markers long? No. So let me ask you, are those two congruent? No. So does it work for the rhombus? No. Does it work for the square though? That LV and OE are congruent? Yes. Look at your property table. Notice that the diagonals are congruent. It doesn't show up for the rhombus. Where does it show up? It shows up for the square, but where else? Diagonals are congruent. The rectangle. So notice that that's true for the rectangle, and the rectangle passed along to the square, but the rhombus didn't have that to begin with. Okay? So is this going to be always or sometimes? Sometimes. When is that sometimes? When it is a square. And the last one's complicated. Angle LOE. Remember that the vertex goes in the middle. So my vertex is at O. So LOE is going to be right here. LOE. Right there. Number 1. It's congruent to VOE. VOE. Which is number 2. Just looking at your picture, does it look like number 1 equals number 2? Yeah. Looking at your square, does it look like number 1 equals number 2? Yeah, pretty much, okay? So that's why it's important to draw accurate pictures, make sure they're neat. The other thing we know is look at your properties for the rhombus. Does any of them talk about something that we're doing here? Look at your properties for the rhombus. That's not, we're talking about an angle here, so that's not going to help.
What was the diagonal?
The diagonals, what is it? The diagonals bisect opposite angles. Bisect means it cuts into 2 equal pieces. So do you see how it goes in here? It cuts into 2 equal pieces. That's exactly the property it says. So is this true for the rhombus? Is it true for the square? Yes? So it's going to be always or sometimes? Always. This is always true. Alright, I got very few class participation. What's the issue? What can I help you with? What's confusing about these? Henry? No. Okay, so how can I help you memorize the properties? I mean, study is the obvious answer. Is there anything that I can do better? I would say for your homework tonight, I would maybe memorize the properties in addition to the problems I give you, because they are going to keep showing up. When I memorize the properties, and this may not work for everyone, I never memorize the words. I only memorize the pictures. So when I see something like a rhombus, I know what a rhombus looks like, and if in my head I would draw the diagonals, and I'd say, oh look, those look 90 degrees. Oh yeah, that was a property, that the diagonals are perpendicular. Does that make sense? So I didn't memorize that the diagonals are perpendicular. I would just draw a picture and then take a look at it. So that's one way to do it if you want. You have to be pretty good with your drawings, and you have to kind of visualize things. Remember, you don't need to memorize as many as we put on the chart. I didn't tape them up yet. There's some over there. We don't have to memorize as many as we put on the chart from yesterday, right? You only need to memorize like parallelograms because they trickle down, right? Once you know those 5, those are true for all of them. And then you need to know the 3 for the rhombus and the 2 for the rectangle, right? So it's only 10 total. You just need to know where they go. Yes, it will require hard work. I will tell you this test is usually one of the lowest tests I have because people don't put in the work that they need to. So last year the test scores were very low because people came in unprepared. Okay? Gustavo? No, sir. Okay? So please start studying right now, right? The Georgetown tutors will be here again today. I had a few people come last time, but not as many as I would have expected. Please, they're wonderfully nice and helpful. All right? Every single person yesterday had a person to work one-on-one with them. So take advantage of it. So you can do your homework with them and just talk things through with them, okay? Ready to move on? We're doing the same type of thing. So now we're going to do a rectangle, and now we're going to do hate so love. All right? It's going to be an equal opportunity emotionally. We'll love, we'll hate, okay? So what should we do first? Draw a rectangle. Make sure it's good. And then, how do I need to label it? Sorry, how do I need to label it? Well, first off, what are the points? H. Could I put A over here? No. Make sure you walk straight around. Could I put T over here? No. No, you got to go all the way around. Keep going in a circle, okay? H-A-T-E. And is a square a rectangle? So we should also include a square. So that's a special case. H-A-T-E. And remember, the square basically gets all the properties. So we don't really have to worry about the square, but don't forget about it. The square basically gets all the properties. All right, tell me there's something I can add to my rectangle here. Tell me something I can add to my rectangle. Opposite angles are congruent, which is absolutely true. Can we be a bit more specific because it's a rectangle? 4 right angles. Good. Go ahead. Name something else. What else can we add? Luis? Tick marks, which 2 sides? AT and HE. And the other one? And how many should they get? Should they get 1? 2. Because that's my second set. Anything else? Mario. I'm sorry, say that again? What do you mean the X on it? Talking about the diagonal? So you want to draw on the diagonal? Diagonal. Diagonal. Okay? What else? There's one big one we're missing. So what do we have for this one that's missing? Parallel? So we need to show the parallel side. So this one's going to be parallel to HE. This one and T. Okay, I think that's enough to get started. And we can figure out if we're missing something later, okay? Is H congruent to A? H congruent to A. So look for your rectangle. Is H congruent to A? Yes. Is that true for the square as well? Yes. So is that going to be always or sometimes? Always. This making a little more sense? A little more sense? HA is congruent to TE. Cindy, is that true for the rectangle? HA is congruent to TE. Is that true for the square? So always or sometimes true? Always. On your quiz and your test, be sure to read the directions carefully, okay? Tez, is HA congruent to AT for the rectangle? No. Is it true for the square? Always or sometimes? So is it true, though, for the rectangle always or sometimes? Did you say both yes? So if it's not always true, then it has to be, when is it true? It's when that rectangle is actually a square. Okay? So it's sometimes true when we have the special case where the rectangle is a square. Does that make sense? This is sometimes. HT is congruent to AE. HT, AE. Well, what are those, first off? Diagonals. Do they look about the same length for the rectangle? Yes? Is that one of our properties for the rectangle? Yeah. So are they true for this one? They're true for this. Do I need to go, am I going too fast? Are we confused? I just see a lot of looks. You got to tell me what's going on. Are we confused? Yes or no? You got to give me something. Are we bored or totally lost? A little bit of bored, a little bit of totally lost. Great. So HT is always equal to AE, because one of our properties for rectangles on your sheet is that the diagonals are congruent, right? So it's true for this one. Is it true for the square? HT, AE. Is that true? Yes? So is it always or sometimes? Always. Alright, this one might be a little tricky. HT, what does that symbol mean? It's perpendicular to AE. Is that true for the rectangle? No. It's not true. Is it true for the square? Yes. The square is perpendicular. Do you see the right angle there? If you look at this one's acute and this one's obtuse. So notice that that is not a right angle. Okay? It's even better if you draw an even skinnier rectangle. You draw a really skinny one. This is a good method. If you're ever confused, draw a rectangle that looks very different from what you drew the first time, and check it again. This clearly is not perpendicular, right? Because this one is very acute and this one's very obtuse. So it's one way you can check pretty easily. So this is going to be always or sometimes? Sometimes. Angle HAE is congruent to angle TAE. HAE is congruent to TAE. So HAE is number 1. TAE is number 2. Those look the same size there. I would say no. Which one's bigger? 2 is bigger? I'd say angle 1 is much bigger. Look back over here. Angle 1 is going to be all this guy. Angle 2 is just going to be this little tiny sliver. Which one's bigger? 1. So are those equal for the rectangle? Would they be true down here? 1 and 2? Yes, because remember, all the properties are going to be true for the square. So is that always or sometimes? Sometimes. If it were a rhombus, it would be always. Yes. So if this is exactly the same problem as what we did last time here. 1 and 2, because it worked for the rhombus and it worked for the square, so it would be always. If we compare it to the rectangle, it doesn't work for the rectangle, but it does work for the square, so it's sometimes. That is all that 8.4 is, okay? Whoops. So let me give you your homework, and then I want to talk about the quiz and ask you guys what you want to do for the last 5 minutes, okay? So your homework, you already did number 1. Last night you did 19 through 24, right? So your homework then is to complete the remaining one. These two are what we just did. A rhombus and a rectangle, we said always or sometimes. These ones you have to solve some problems using some math, okay? You have to solve some of the problems using some math. So I'd like to do one of those right now, if that's okay. And this too. So yes, it is a lot. Okay? However, remember, the Georgetown students are here. Come, please. Bring a friend. You two can work together with the partners, all right? All right? No, they actually just worked out that way. So yes, there is a lot of homework, but they can help you prep for the quiz, okay? Can we do one of these problems together? So let's do one of these together so we can start your homework. Everybody got it? So 26, 27, or 28? So let's zoom in. So let's do 26 first. Let me zoom in again. Oops. All right, there's 26. What type of shape is 26? Rhombus. So it says first, classify the special quadrilateral. Explain your reasoning. Why do you know that that's a rhombus? Close congruent sides. Perfect. Okay. Then find the values of x and y. Okay. So for a rhombus, which one would you like to do first, x or y? You want to do x first? Okay. So for a rhombus, what do we know about B and C then? What do we know about B and C? Angle B and angle C. They're congruent. So for a rhombus, let me draw a different rhombus. Here's A, B, C, D. We know that A is congruent to C, right? And we know that B is congruent to D. But do we know that B and C are congruent? No. So what are B and C? Are they opposite or are they next to each other? What's the word for next to? Do we have a property that talks about consecutive angles? Where is it? What's it listed under? Parallelogram. But remember, if it's for a parallelogram, isn't it true for a rhombus as well? So consecutive angles are 180. Supplementary, so they add up to 180. So are these two next to each other? So therefore they must add up to? So you get 104 plus what? Equals? 180. You guys can solve that, right? Subtract 104 from both sides. What do you get? X equals? What does X equal? 76. You wouldn't have to worry about what? So, two things. First off, it's not a square. It's a rhombus. Second off, we do need to worry about it. But remember, whenever you're given two variables like x and y, you have to deal with them separately. So you're going to work with the x first and then the y second. Okay, so now we did x. Let's solve for y now. How can I solve for y? Use your picture, okay? Why did you say that? Because they're next to each other? They're not opposite, so opposite would mean across, actually. They are next to each other, but that's not why they're equal. Why is it that they're equal? Because they're congruent. All sides of a rhombus are equal, right? That's the definition of a rhombus. So if I give you one side over here, it has to equal the other side over there. How would I solve this? Subtract y from both sides. So you get 8 equals 2y. So therefore y equals 4. Okay? So all you need to do is recognize what shape it is, and then find your properties. With your properties, then, you need to set up an equation. Okay? Whether they add up to 180, or whether they're equal to each other. Those are really your only two options, I think. Right? And I can think of right now. Any questions on 26? I want to do 28. I know. Want to do 28? So, 28. What shape is 28? Square. Pretty obvious, right? Do we know, actually, that it's a square? What does a square need to have? Right. It needs to have 4 right angles and 4 equal sides, yes. But it tells us that this is perpendicular, right? For a rectangle, are the diagonals perpendicular for a rectangle? No, it's only for a rhombus, right? So we know then if it's got the part for the rhombus and it's got the part for the rectangle, it's got to be actually a square. You're correct, but it's not immediately obvious, okay? So we know it's a square. What do we know about 10 and 2y? They're the same because this is this part of the diagonal, this is that part of the diagonal. Do we agree that those bisect each other? Because that's one of the properties from parallelograms, right? So we know that 10 is equal to 2y, so therefore y equals 5. The other part is a little bit harder. What do we know about the x's, the x parts? 5x equals 3x plus 18. Notice that this angle right here is going to be congruent to this angle down here. Everybody see those two? So we get 5x equals 3x plus 18. How do we solve that? Subtract 3x. So we get 2x equals 18. X equals 9. Okay? Yes, this is an ugly chapter. Yes, it is very tough to understand. In my opinion, I have given you a much better advantage than last year's class. Last year I wasn't very good at this chapter. Hopefully I'm a little bit better this year. Last year they didn't have this property sheet. Okay? So hopefully that helps. Like I said, last year we didn't do any of this stuff. So hopefully it helps. All that being said, you have to take responsibility for it at this point, okay? kind of giving you everything you need. We've done a bunch of examples, and now it's kind of on you. Okay? That makes sense? So I will tell you, absolutely, if you haven't been studying for tests yet, it will be ugly if you don't for this one. B, do not, I would say, start early, study often. Don't try and memorize all these at one point in time. It will just get ugly, okay? Those two make sense? You're going to have to spend spend 15 minutes tonight, tomorrow, once over the weekend, once on Monday, once on Tuesday, okay? Don't do it like 3 hours the night before. It'll just get super confusing, okay? So the test is going to be all of Chapter 8. The quiz, which is on Wednesday, is going to be 8.2 to 8.4. We're going to talk about that more tomorrow. Tomorrow we're going to do a lot of practice, okay?